Welcome back. One by one, monuments to the veterans of the Confederacy are disappearing across the South. As we speak, the debate is raging right up the road in Tampa, but it hasn't gained traction in Bradenton yet, where this 94-year-old Confederate monument sits outside the Manatee County Courthouse. The monument was unveiled in June of 1924, quote, "In memory of our Confederate soldiers, the names of Jefferson Davis, Stonewall Jackson, and Robert E. Lee etched on the sides." A newspaper clipping from the time recalls how the president of the United Daughters of the Confederation dedicated the monument, saying the sacrifices of the Confederate soldiers will go down, quote, "as an inspiration to generations of Americans yet unborn." And joining us with more local reaction to the Confederate monument is Rodney Jones, president of the Manatee County NAACP, Rod Thompson, president of the Sarasota Republican Club, and joining us by Skype is Reverend Russell Meyer, executive director of the Florida Council of Churches. And Rodney, I want to start with you because you saw that quote that I just read, an inspiration to generations of Americans yet unborn. That would be you.
That would be me.
Are you inspired?
I'm not inspired. Nothing against heritage. I think heritage is very important, but everyone does not share that heritage. I think the city of Bradenton, along with our country, is more diverse and more eclectic now than it ever has been. And it was probably appropriate during that time, and I don't think it's appropriate to be displayed at institution that represents all of us be displayed, because not all of us share those sentiments.
Rod, you and I have talked a lot about this, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're from Michigan. You are not a fan of the Confederacy and what it represented, but...
Right. No, I'm not. I'm not a fan of the Confederacy or the Confederate flag, of the causes of anything. So I want to make that really clear. However, I am a fan of maintaining history as history. I don't think it's a good idea to try and erase our history because it's an ugly part of our history, and the whole legacy of slavery from the Constitution forward is the biggest mistake that our country has made. But it's part of our country's history. Monuments remind us of our country's history, and I think that it's important for all Americans, including young black children, to know that that's a part of our history. And what went on from the 1870s to the 1940s and the remembrance of the Confederacy and all is an important part of what's going on today still.
Let's go out to Reverend Meyer, because Reverend Meyer is at a vigil just wrapping up in Tampa over the monument outside the Hillsborough County Courthouse. And you might remember just a couple of weeks ago, Hillsborough County Commissioners narrowly voted to leave it in place, but there seems to be movement. At least one county commissioner who voted to keep it in place has apparently changed his mind. Reverend Meyer, where does that stand right now, and what took place tonight?
Well, we think that it's going to be moved to a suitable location where you can remember the dead without interfering with the practice of justice today. We think that's going to happen. It's a question of when. We believe it will happen on Wednesday morning. And we think that there's sufficient understanding now across the community to do that. What they said, at least most of them, all but one of them, said they didn't have a place to move it to, but we think that problem will be solved.
Well, just to let our viewers know, what is happening on Wednesday?
On Wednesday morning, the Board of County Commissioners will meet again, and it is already on the agenda for the day to take up the question of where to move it. It's a slightly differently worded question this time than last time, and we believe there'll be sufficient spiritual, moral, historical, and present-day thinking that will have a positive vote.
Rodney, let me get at least one more question into you, because this situation in Tampa has been taking place for the last couple of weeks. It's made national news. Other cases that we reported have. How come there's been nothing about the monument in Bradenton?
Like I said, it's unless you give intent to look at it, you almost just walk by it. I think it's designed. There's a neat little hedge around it that's pretty high up where the wording is. So unless you made a deliberate effort to take a look at it, you just would not notice. It's not like a Confederate soldier on a horse or something more prominent. So it's almost something that unless you were looking, you just walk by it.
Rod, this is a situation that really around the Suncoast and the greater Tampa Bay area really has been percolating for quite a long time. There's that huge flag at the intersection of 75, you're shaking your head, and I-4. And for a lot of people in our area, that is almost a poke in the eye every time they drive past it. On the other hand, there are people who believe that is a symbol of their shared heritage.
So that's on private property there, and they can do what they want with it. I don't like seeing it, but they have a right to fly it. I wouldn't say that you want that flag flying over any of our public institutions. I wouldn't care for that. You know, on the monument in Bradenton there, it is so well hidden. My gosh, I didn't know it was there until this issue came up, and even Rodney didn't until recently.
Okay, we are just getting started with our conversation, and we'll pick it right up after we check the weather. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing the recent debate over monuments to the Confederacy. The Suncoast has one of these monuments outside the Manatee County Courthouse, and tonight we are joined by Rodney Jones of the NAACP in Manatee County, Rod Thompson of the Sarasota Republican Club, and joining us by Skype is Reverend Russell Meyer of the Florida Council of Churches. And Reverend Meyer is at a vigil in Tampa where there was a group of people who want continually to get the monument outside the Hillsborough County Courthouse removed. There is a new vote that will be taking place in the Hillsborough County Commission on Wednesday. And as Reverend Meyer joins us, a group of protesters who want to keep that monument right where it is forming down, or they want to keep it, take it down. Reverend Meyer, what's going on right outside your window right now?
Well, what's behind me right now is the final members of the rally and vigil tonight, continuing to hold their signs up passerbys. We had a dozen faith leaders, brown, black, and white, Christian, Muslim, and Jew, speak for about 45 minutes. We began with prayer and ended in a circle prayer, singing, "We shall overcome. This monument must go today." So we had a very powerful spiritual event.
Well, let me ask you this, because at a lot of these events, you've also had people from the other side, like the Sons of the Confederacy, show up, and basically it's been peaceful, but it's been tension-filled. Was there anybody there today?
No, I've done a couple of these events so far. I haven't seen any tension whatever. I have seen them standing in the background and taking notes, and on Facebook pages, they have, you know, joined our groups, and so they're tracking everything we do. But we're here in the spirit and flesh of love, and so we welcome them to be here. I would like to go back to something that was said in the earlier segment about the erasure of history. These monuments erase history because they don't tell the full story. They don't talk about the rape and the violence, the oppression, the forced labor that the South was about in terms of slavery. And if what we want to remember forward, we need to have monuments to the slaves. We need to represent the people who actually built most of the infrastructure in the South. It was not white plantation owners who actually did the labor and built things. It was black people.
Rod, let me ask you about that, because that has been the flip side of the argument. In fact, it's happened in every community where there's been this debate. The New Orleans mayor, Mitch Landrieu, there was a situation a couple months ago where he took down the monuments in New Orleans, and he said, "I believe we must remember all of our history, but not revere it." And he went on to say these monuments have stood not as a historic educational markers of our legacy of slavery and segregation, but in celebration of it.
Well, I don't see it that way. I see them mostly as that, as a part of history, and maybe even when they were put up in 1911 and 1924, when they were put up in that period post-Confederacy, when the South really wasn't accepting things they were put up, that still remains a part of our history. Now, where I sort of agree with the Reverend there is that what I think is a reasonable reaction to this would be to add additional monuments that add further context in which the community that is now, today, building the history for future generations adds to the history from the previous generations, and maybe we'll be judged well, maybe we won't, but we will be part of the future history looked back upon. I think that that's a much more reasonable way to go about this, rather than tearing down monuments, because I got to tell you, Alan, whenever I think of tearing down monuments, I think from Rome to Russia, you know, where that's what conquerors, those in power, always did. You always tear down the monuments, you rename the cities, you get rid of that legacy. That's really not been the history of our country in any respect. And so I think an additional monuments to further expand in our history would be in order.
Rodney, I'm going to take a guess that I'm going to get a couple of comments on Facebook tomorrow morning, and it's going to go something like this. ABC7, why are you stirring all this up? So why don't you answer the question for me?
I think it's important. I can disagree. I don't believe in tearing them down as in a destructive measure, but I can definitely agree with removing those to another place that may be more appropriate. If you take that flag on 75, I'm offended every time I ride by that flag. I don't view it as a part of my heritage or something that needs to be remembered by my family. The brutality of that time is one of the darkest times in American history, especially for people of color, for black people. And so I don't want to see it, and you know, to be honest, I shouldn't have to see it.
Well, is there a difference between that, as Rod pointed out, which is on private property, and a monument like next to the courthouse, which is on public property?
There's definitely a difference. I'm definitely in agreement with Rod. I think if it's private property, you have a right to do as you please, and if you don't like it, don't look. But on public lands, I view that a little bit differently, especially in places such as the courthouse that represents justice and equality for all people. I think the entire area should represent that, and so if we want to have a remembrance of what one views as heritage and one views as a very difficult time, an oppressive time, and a murdersome time for a race of people, I think it should be put someplace else.
We should also point out there is another Confederate monument and flag at the Gamble Historic Park. There's a Confederate flag there. That's also an issue that people are aware of. Reverend Meyer, let me ask you this, because there seems to be some outside influence that is taking place, at least in the Tampa Bay area. You have the Tampa Rays and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which have both released statements for removing the monument from the courthouse in Tampa. And I'm wondering what is at play here, and I'm thinking about that the NFL just awarded Tampa another Super Bowl, and is there something going on here that the NFL or the Buccaneers are applying pressure because they want that Super Bowl in Tampa?
Well, I look at it as just where we are in our society today. So the NFL does not want their halftime Super Bowl commentators talking about a Confederate monument in downtown Tampa. They will not come to Tampa. They will move the Super Bowl because that's not why they're coming here. And if the controversy continues, all big league sports organizations are going to avoid this as a market to be, because when they come here, they want to be able to talk about the sport. They don't want to talk about racial controversy. And so we need to end this quickly. International companies that are looking to come to Tampa Bay, they want to make certain that their employees, when they bring them into Tampa, are going to feel welcome, safe, and secure, that they're not going to be judged by the color of their skin or their accent or their national origin. This is a symbol, always has been and continues to be, that white people will get preference. And we need to take it down and say that's not what we believe today.
All right, let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests, plus what some of our viewers are saying about Friday's topic, the week in Washington. Welcome back. Are Confederate monuments a way to preserve heritage, or do they glorify an era of slavery and racism? Can there be a middle ground? Our guests join us right now for final thoughts. And Reverend Meyer, I'll put that question to you because some people have suggested a middle ground here, either adding other monuments to the Confederate monuments or moving them but not removing them from public view. I mean, is there a middle ground here that you would support?
Well, the middle ground is a symbol that the whole community can gather around and feel like I identify with that. And so we have to be able to do that. This is a symbol of division that is loved by some and brings terror and hate into others. So it doesn't belong in front of the county courthouse because it doesn't promise fairness and justice to all. Right. It can go in a county cemetery where it can be honored by all appropriately.
Rod, I'm going to ask you a tough question here because I understand what you're saying about you don't erase history, you study it. But when you watch interviews with people who want the monuments to stay exactly where they were and they talk about heritage and pride and how they were wronged, when, you know, do you think that the argument is because they believe that, you know, the South was right when they seceded and they fought that war and what that war was about?
That's not a tough question at all. I mean, I heard Kate's package ahead of time here, and I could hardly disagree with that man more. The South is not going to rise again, except it already has, and that everybody in the country wants to move to the South just about. I mean, the South is a great place to live as part of the United States of America. I mean, we are a united country. We have been for a long time. That sort of thing is not happening again. I'd like to say that what really bugs me, and it was brought up there by Reverend Meyer, is the idea of the national sports teams always getting involved with local politics and political issues that are divisive. They did that in North Carolina. They've tried to do a number of things. On this one, you know, I'm more ambivalent on this one, as you can tell. But on that, the bathrooms one, where you allow men to go into it.
It is free market.
Well, yeah, here's what happens. The fans are all over the place on this. I mean, matter of fact, the NFL fans are probably a little bit more conservative than the average American. I'm a big NFL fan. I'm a big NBA fan. And when they get involved with that, I think that that hurts them long term. I wish they wouldn't do it because it ruins sports for Americans.
Rodney, I want to give you the last word.
I don't think if we were in a time where I don't believe that I'll never live under this premise that we're all together, because we're not. And we need to stop saying that, because it's just not true. When my conditions as a black male in this country, or a black person in this country, or a brown person, and there's a true sense of equality, I would say let that statue stay. That's a time that's gone, but that time is still here. All the data speaks to it. If you look at it, like I've said before, if you look at incarceration rates, educational attainment, everything that spells prosperity, somehow we seem to lag far behind other populations. So I think it needs to be moved to an appropriate place where those that want to see that type of thing can definitely go and take part in that activity. But me, myself, as a citizen and a member of Manatee County, and lifelong member of Manatee County, I find it offensive.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. But before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about Friday's topic, our analysis of the week in Washington. Last week, new details emerged about a June 2016 meeting between top members of the Trump campaign and Russians with alleged ties to the Kremlin. Emails released by Donald Trump Jr. show the meeting was supposed to be about information damaging to the Clinton campaign. President Trump says nothing illegal happened and calls it opposition research. Here's what some of you are saying. Mike Finley writes, I think it's irrelevant, just more hate from America-destroying liberal socialists. Robert Rubelin writes, wow, a hostile country involved in our elections and your Trump supporters think it's nothing. How patriotic of you. And Shannon Zielinski writes, it just keeps coming. It's hysterical. Well, what do you think about the Confederate Memorial at the Manatee County Courthouse? Join tonight's conversation by visiting our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, you can watch past discussions. They're on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks to all our guests for being here tonight. Rodney Jones is president of the Manatee County NAACP. Rod Thompson is president of the Sarasota Republican Club, and Reverend Russell Meyer is the executive director of the Florida Council of Churches. He joined us by Skype.